You wanted the best. You've got the best podcast. The hottest podcast in the world. The Chris Voss Show, the preeminent podcast with guests so smart you may experience serious brain bleed. The CEOs, authors, thought leaders, visionaries, and motivators. Get ready. Strap yourself in. Keep your hands, arms, and legs inside the vehicle at all times, because you're about to go on a monster education roller coaster with your brain. Now, here's your host, Chris Voss.
Hi, folks. It's Voss here from thechrisvossshow.com. Wow, that kind of surprised me. She sure came in on that one hard. Welcome to the big show, my family friends. We certainly appreciate you guys here. As always, the Chris Voss Show loves you. We've been around for 16 years and 2,000 episodes, and I think we're going to quit 16 more years from now, so just hang on for the next 16 years. And I think we're going to quit around year 30 or something, that or when I die. They'll just probably still pop. They're probably just going to stick a mic down into the coffin and just... I don't know. You'll just hear the maggots eating me. I don't know. That sounds macabre to start a show. Jesus Christ, Chris. Anyway, go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss. Chris Voss, one of the TikTokity and all those crazy places on the internet the Chris Voss Show is. Today we have two amazing young ladies on the show. They are the purveyors of this amazing podcast that I got a great laugh off when I saw the title, Business Psychos Podcast. That was the second title we were going to use before we settled on the Chris Voss Show. We have Mary Schaub and Katie Bickford on the show with us today. We'll be talking to us about their psychotic podcast for business. Katie and Mary met 15 years ago, meeting at an insight meditation retreat outside Boston with Dan Brown. She was talking about the Harvard psychologist and booze scholar, not the Da Vinci Code, when they say Don Brown. They were just being in the process of soul searching, both still deeply entrenched in the mindset of living for work. And over the years, the pair have enjoyed hours of deep chat about personal development, surviving and thriving one's career. Mary has spent the last 3 decades building transformative capabilities at top-tier consultancies, Oliver Wyman and Boston Consulting Group, and has held executive roles, top 1% in change management for large financial institutions. Katie has over 20 years of experience in building global revenue teams in high-growth tech companies, achieving $3 billion exits through public listings or private equity acquisitions. She's also the author of Paranama Method, a guide for personal transformation. Welcome to the show, ladies. How are you?
Awesome. Happy to be here.
There you go. Katie, did I get the title of your book right?
That you got it. You landed it.
There we go. We have to ask you, because I've never heard of what a paranama is. Wasn't that a song off the album 1984 by Van Halen? Paranama. Do 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 do. I'm gonna have to pay royalties.
I think that, yeah. Look, Chris. I think that's probably the more PG rated naming of the method. It's actually, the term is parinama, but it's a Sanskrit word. It's an Indian word, and because I'm just saying it in English, I'm saying it's parinama. So anybody who says it any other way is good to go.
There you go. So, can you just give us a quick meaning on it? Because I'm wondering.
Yeah. So parinama, the word itself, it means transformation. That's both practical and philosophical. So, and it's kind of very similar to what our podcast Business Psychos is about, which is about transformation and really up-leveling yourself, through self-actualization and making, in our case, your career better by doing things that are both introspective, but also things where you actually have to execute them and do things differently.
You got to execute differently.
That's a fact.
Do the same thing, you get the same results. So did we get a .com from you ladies yet?
Yeah, we're at businesspsychos.com. Super easy.
There you go. So hence the title. I got a good laugh off it. It's very catchy. Why did you choose this title?
So we wanted to bring a little bit of light to a serious subject when we talk about navigating your career and all this great stuff. The show is really about how to navigate the complexity of work culture and modern life without becoming a psycho. So we like to I mean, you got to make fun of this stuff. So we talk about things that we say execs aren't supposed to talk about, so that our listeners can make the work game work for them. And we have fun. We make fun of the absurdity of it all. Everyone's very concerned about work. They're reevaluating their relationship to work right now. It's a very serious subject. So Psychos brings a little bit of light to it.
A little bit of, I think, levity. Is that the right word I'm looking for? Yeah. There you go. So, Katie, do you want to throw in for any that on that answer?
I think Mary did a great job with explaining that. Yeah, I think that one of the things when we were starting to work on the podcast, people had suggested things like, business therapy, and neither of us are therapists. And so the idea that we wanted to talk about things that had like a psychological component to them, and also talk about business, because ultimately the purpose of the podcast is to talk to people about how to actually succeed in business, not just the talk track that you hear where people either, taking it way too seriously and burning out, or are, kind of taking, a really negative approach and, kind of torpedoing their, professional credibility as a result of that.
There's a lot of psychosis and psychoticism. Are those two different things? I'm not sure. I flunked high school. I flunked second grade. That's a joke. So I haven't used that callback joke in a million years. I flunked second grade. Who the fuck's flunked second grade, man? What the fuck? Like, there you go. So you have great content on here. Mental health at work, breaking the silence and building resilience. High-performing toxic cultures versus low-performing healthy ones. That's kind of interesting. The pain and power of outgrowing people and places. That sounds like my first 10 marriages. The perils of overachieving, fear, validation, and burnout. Ageism in the workplace. That's a really big deal for people our age. Or my age, I should say. Be yourself, navigating authenticity in the workplace. I tried that, but I was walking around in my underwear at the office and HR called. Conquering toxic shame. Navigating power, control, and empathy in the workplace, or punching people in the face. No, I just made that end part up. Let's see. Work isn't family. The pitfalls of blurring professional lines. Yeah, that's always a problem, especially if you try and mate with someone at work. Real friends or convenient allies. The truth about workplace friendships. Yeah, be careful, folks. Don't do it. Yeah, so you guys got some great content you're putting up. And what do you hope people gain from the podcast? What do you hope they come away with when they listen to it?
I think the first thing is that they're not alone. The tagline, we talk about things that people aren't supposed to talk about. There is a game, there's a theater to a lot of the corporate work world. And when you're young, and by the way, you said we're of a different generation. We're of the same generation. I've heard you say on the show before, we're Gen X. So we're all tracking about the same. Oh. And when I was growing up, I don't know about you, but I had this idea, this fantasy of what work was. You'd stay at one company for 30 years. You'd maybe get a watch when you're 40 or 50th year, right? They don't do that anymore. And I thought, well, hey, if you work really hard, everyone appreciates what you do. You'll get well paid. You'll get promoted. You'll be taken care of. It'll all make sense. And then you start to understand the complexity of it, the politics, the interpersonal dynamics, and you realize that it's not as straightforward as that. And no one really talks about this. There's it's a little bit of that Wizard of Oz, like don't look behind the curtain. All right, if you scratch at the veneer too much, some of it starts to come away. Certainly, your boss isn't going to tell you that it's all a game. They're not going to tell you don't work hard. It's actually more of who you know. So we do want to have an honest conversation about how to navigate all of these things. This isn't hey, burn the place down, companies are bad, and that's not what we're doing here. It's just, your trusted mentors who've been through this, who've walked through these paths before, giving you a little bit of the tea to tell you about how things really work, how to take care of yourself, and how to play the game so that you can get what you want out of it. Because I think something happens along the way where you forget why you're even working. What are you doing it for? Yeah. What's the greater purpose?
Why am I here?
Yeah.
Is always that fun part. So, tell us a little bit about yourselves. So you guys ever done a podcast before? Give us a little bit of history of how you navigated the business world, what gives you the acumen in your experience of business to talk about these things, of course, and kind of maybe what motivated you to grow up, become entrepreneurs, and influence there. I'll give each of you a shot at that.
I'll start. I grew up in northern New Jersey. I come from a blue collar family, raised by my dad, smart guy, entrepreneur. He was a mechanic and fireman by trade. And he was of a different generation. We call him a boomer now, which I hate even using that word because it's so pejorative. The poor,
Okay, boomer.
But, yeah, exactly. But he was a boomer, and he grew up in a different time. He had a challenging life and money problems and all that good stuff. And I would probably guess he did not have a family where there was a lot of healthy communication going on.
Oh,
but he endured.
It's overrated anyway.
Yeah, I mean, it's better to have trauma. It toughens the soul, right? Makes you better character. So, as a result, I did not have, open communication with my dad. But from the time I was a teenager until probably my early 30s, I'd go to his house on a Saturday morning, and we'd just sit at the table, drink coffee, and we'd just talk. And every once in a while, like a little emotional exchange would sneak in between politics and community gossip and all that. And so I think the podcast for me, I mean, I love the intellectual side of things. I certainly love talking, and Katie and I have been friends for a while, and we love to talk. But I think there's something that scratches a different emotional intimacy itch there that goes back to my relationship with my dad. And frankly, I just find that, I don't know, you talk about it on the show, Chris, about stories, so I think there's something about people sitting down and talking to one another that just makes you feel very alive. It makes you feel really present and kind of a part of something bigger. And I think podcasts are awesome for it.
Definitely. And if I could jump in on that, you've obviously heard me say stories are the owner's manual to life, or what we think, and people are the sum of all their stories. There's another quote that I have that's about that. And they're so important. You guys mentioned earlier in the show about how it's important by sharing our stories that we find out we're not alone. It's really easy to get isolated and depressed, and why has this happened to me? And it feels like the whole world or universe is beaming some sort of crisis down onto you, and you're just like, why does the world hate me today? But so many of us, the human experience, we share it, and it's that sharing that really helps. I mean, it's an old story. I haven't regurgitated it in a while, but years ago, I think 2014, when my dog passed, it was an immediate shock, and I wrote this huge long post about what I was going through that night, and just it was basically my first dog, and basically my child, since I'm a single guy and my dogs are my kids. I can't afford kids. I can't afford all the divorces, so I skipped that too. I'm still saving up a few million. I'm up to about $3 million, and I'm just waiting to meet the right woman so I can get my first divorce facilitated. Anyway, that's a joke. Man. Marriage jokes on the Chris Voss Show. But basically, I sat there for half an hour looking at this post going, this thing is so selfish. Me. Oh, poe is me. My dog passed away. And this just seems like the most selfish post I could ever make. And it's also very personal, which I didn't really want to share at the time. I've probably become more personal and authentic now since then, when I saw the magic of it. And I remember I was passing out, and I was just like, fuck it. I just hit press and went to bed. And it was one of the most magical things I ever did because of how much it helped and reached other people. Mm-hmm. And the next morning I woke up to people calling me and people crying and people in the comments section going, wow, I never got closure with my dog passing. I never got closure with my father or family passing. I never dealt with some of the emotional issues of death and stuff. And you just pouring out your soul and opening your chest and letting it all bleed out in text, moved me to a point to help me facilitate those things. And it helps so many people. Like years later, people still, hey, you remember that post you did? That really helped recently when whatever happened. And I just realized how far-reaching it was and how helpful it was to other people. When for me, it seemed like a very selfish moment. So that's the beauty of what we do. And when I meet people that they're like, I'm not going to write a book and share my story. Oh, no one wants to hear my grievances or whatever. But no, this is the owner's manual life. This is by hearing other people's stories, you can learn how they got through their cathartic times and survived. And so
Absolutely.
they can give you a roadmap out, a blueprint out. Katie, want to jump in here with your thoughts?
Yeah. First of all, thank you for sharing that, Chris. It's really beautiful. I think that one of the things with our podcast, where we go into really deep stories that involve being humiliated and coming back from it, doing stupid things. I mean, there's one story, and I think statute of limitations now applies, where I was a pharmaceutical rep for a large company, and I reached into my my supply and started taking my own drugs. So, but I think that, to me, one of the things about the podcast is there was never really a reason for me personally to do one, until this really became clear. And I think one of the biggest things is that right now, professional life is going through this huge change, and there's so much anxiety around it because of all of the layoffs. And there's also a lot of stuff with social media where I think people feel really guilty about having professional jobs, where they feel like somehow they're missing out on life and they're doing everything wrong. So there's a lot of shame where they're looking at trust fund people who have goat farms and, people, all this,
Fuck those
people. Yeah, fuck those people that people who knit for a living. And it's it's not it's not a livelihood, but they see it. And I think what it does is it just really doubles down on this sense of oh, I work at this corporate job, I'm, such a loser. When if it's reframed where we're looking at working in corporate and professional jobs as a chance to have access to capital and it's make some money. And then if we look at that as a chance to think about, okay, well, what do I want to do with that money? So instead of just doing, consumerism and just trying to buy a bunch of, crap, it's okay, let's reevaluate our lives about what we want to build on our terms. So a lot of what we're talking about in the podcast is, for me and my background, I'm kind of the wild card of the two of us, where I've, lived in Bali and India and done all sorts of, this crazy stuff in addition to building companies and stuff. But and I actually want to come back and be look, eat, pray, love. Eventually you have to come back to your life. And I know there's this whole thing where it's just go out and live your best life, but there really is a practical life you have to come back to, and being able to make the most out of a professional career so that you can live the life that you ultimately want that aligns with your values. I think there's a really important place right now to be talking about this.
Definitely. Right now, COVID really changed a lot of the game. Well, it did
Yes.
change the game. I've got COVID right now, so thanks, COVID, 4.5 years later for the first time. The people are he's not going to survive to episode 2001. Anyway, but people really question stuff. I mean, I had a cathartic moment of losing hundreds of thousands of dollars a year in events being shut down that we go out and do interviews on. I sat down and said, I can lose the two last members of my family that are standing, and they can be gone tomorrow. Who gives a fuck about cars
Yes.
and careers and money? And I mean, it's important, but it just really hyper focused. Even my guy friends, we started saying, "I love you, man," when we would hang up after talking, because you never knew if you're going to see anybody again.
Chris, I was down in New York City, where it was sort of ground zero when COVID hit, and I was actually living down by ground zero itself.
Wow.
And we would hear sirens day and night for
Yeah.
weeks. And a mile up the road, West Side Highway, they had by the convention center was a mobile morgue unit. They were scary freaking times. We forget it's been 4.5 years.
Yeah,
But
people forget.
it was just profoundly disturbing. And a lot of us, and we're lucky that there were many people who couldn't work during that, but we were lucky. But it was also very surreal to be on a conference call talking about performance reviews and then be Googling whether I need to wash my groceries.
Yeah,
You know, is this like really this like dissonance of like, is this like, how am I continuing with this?
Yeah.
And so, and also was this social experiment because all of a sudden we're not seeing each other, we're not commuting, no dinners or concerts, but
Yeah,
we're
that
not
was the other
spending
hard
money.
thing too. Was the not being able to see people. Like
Yeah.
we always took it for
Yeah.
granted, and then I like really missed it. I go out all the time now just to enjoy it because who knows when the next thing's gonna. That's kind of it brought a real fragility. It made me look at my life. I don't know if I've talked about this on the show. I might have, but it made me realize that I was in the last third or fourth quarter of my life.
Yes.
And most people don't realize that midlife isn't 50. Midlife is 37 with
Yes.
people's life expectancy. And if you're over 37, that might shock you, but it's true. And I looked at when my dad passed, and I realized that I'm in the third or fourth quarter of my life, and many people that are probably Gen X are there. And that's assuming that you get a full run. You don't get hit by a bus tomorrow. God forbid anybody should. And if you're listening to this podcast, don't get out on front of the buses, please, this week. Maybe next week. Anyway, we don't lose readerships. But I realized how important it was. But the same thing transcended into business, where people were like, started questioning what they were doing. Do I love what I do? Why should I do this if I don't love what I do? Why not go pursue my passion and start my own thing instead of working for the man? And a lot of people, I forget the term they had, but a lot of people switched companies, and they kind of started really questioning with their passions and what they wanted to do. There were a lot of great books written during that time, during COVID too. I kind of miss it for the books that we had on the show. But people started questioning, the who, why, where, what, and what am I doing? And, kind of waking up from the sleep of, doing the same thing over and over, the hamster wheel. And it really changed things. They still can't get people back in the office on clawing them back from remote work. So, you guys are talking about this as you're doing this on your podcast because you're flushing this out in kind of this new sort of environment that we work in, where you have remote, hybrid, and then you have the complications of that as such, if you want to get into that.
Yeah, we just did an episode on quiet quitting, which is like this new term where you just kind of show up and go through the motions, or even don't go through the motions. We've received a letter from someone in the audience that was almost kind of like feeling guilty a little bit. He's like, I think he sounded like someone in finance. I don't remember, but he had like an advanced degree, and he's like, I'm not lazy, but this is what I'm doing. I check in, so I badge in, so the company thinks I'm in the office, and then I get coffee, and then I leave an hour later, and I go home and I watch Netflix, and I take a nap, and I go to the gym, and like, should I be feeling guilty about this? Like, he's getting good performance reviews, and it's an interesting new normal, as you say, along with the work from home and not working from home debate, which is really, it's not going away. I think so much of COVID, as you were saying, made us reevaluate things, that even at a minimum, commuting an hour and a half, 2 hours every day, and then spending money on that and dry cleaning and in some cases taxes, people are like, what am I doing? Like, even if I'm not totally changing my job, this is crazy what I put myself through. And once that genie's out of the box and that you can work from home, it's really hard to get it back in there. The quiet quitting, certainly we talked about it on the last show, is it just feels like almost a sick day that's not going away. It feels like a spirit sick day, like I was joking around with Katie that like whenever I'm sick, I watch Harry Potter. I just like binge the Harry Potter movies. That's like my little self-soothing thing. And I have to admit, like when I first heard about quiet quitting, because I am Gen X and because I was, massively independent and making my own lunch in first grade and, all this kind of stuff. Right now I'm about to say, get off my lawn.
Get off my lawn, you kids, you kids, Gen Zers.
Oh my God, when did that happen? When did Prince become the oldies channel?
No kidding.
So I have a little bit of bias, right? I'm aware of this bias I have, this like kind of resentment that, hey, I did this. Like, why are you kids not doing this? This isn't fair. But there is something to be said around jobs where you're making Excels and PowerPoints that no one sees, that no one cares about, that doesn't mean anything day after day. And you're dealing with all this interpersonal politics and this grind. And by the way, at any moment, you could be reorged or laid off at any moment, right? Because the U.S. is a hire, fire at will country. Very few social guardrails. And everyone's just grinding, and we're tired and sick. And I think quiet quitting is a bit of a protest in a way. I think it's just people are tired. I don't know, Katie, you have a view.
Yeah, I think that one of the things about quiet quitting is really similar to anybody who's worked at a job where you're just kind of treading water. It's not that challenging and you're not getting that much out of it, is how exhausting it is. And it's not really winning because you're trading your life. It's your life that you're trading to just kind of like, you're sort of just to collect a wage. And also there's this aspect of deception that you have to really navigate. And I know that, Mary, we've talked about this, that nobody feels like they're winning at life when they're quiet quitting. I mean, and maybe there are a few, I don't know any of them. And, to the point of, return to work, Amazon just announced the, 5-day work week back in the office. And I was just talking with an HR professional, and they were saying, look, it's now part of the negotiation and it's part of you knowing what your market value is, because you can push for the arrangement that you want. And if you're somebody who has to actually take the actual bare minimum, that's going to be something. But, it's like that's now going to be part of negotiating offers, is not only compensation and benefits, but also it's what is your in-office arrangement.
Yeah. In fact, I just heard of this yesterday. I was on TikTok. I know that's surprising to people, but I spend hours on there.
Me too.
Especially when I have COVID. I just lay in the fetal position, and so it's very helpful in surviving COVID. But I guess this came out around July of this year, 2024. But Amazon has been cracking down on employees who come in the office, they get coffee, and they leave. And they call the term coffee badging.
Yeah.
I think I just gave you a new episode.
Yeah. So.
And so they basically, they check in. So when they use the door security card, they know, Amazon goes, okay, well, they showed up at the office. And then they grab their coffee and they leave. So Amazon doesn't know they left because you don't have to swipe your card to leave. Maybe they should change that. But I think that would be against fire code. And so they called it coffee badging. I was just like,
that's crazy.
My God, another term on top of quiet quitting. And so it's designed to circumvent their RTO, return to office policy. It's just a term show at this point, folks, which requires employees to be in the office 5 days a week. And so, basically, I guess what Amazon has done is they're now tracking the hours they spend in the office, and they're putting cameras and sensors, I suppose, to make sure they're wandering around and on their desks. And we've had lots of authors on the show and researchers and professors who've written books that describe the do's and don'ts, or what their opinion is, because everyone seems to have a different one of what people should do. Yeah, it's become really interesting how they're tracking employees.
It's like a cat and mouse game now, right? And I know someone personally in my network. At their company, they had like this administrative assistant ring of deception where all the EAs would take turns going into the office and they would exchange their badges. And then like one EA would take 3 or 4 badges, tag all the other people in. And then, you're Wednesday, I'm Thursday. And then they cracked down and fired everybody.
Oh, really? Wow.
Yeah. And in another company, there's something. Have you heard of mouse jigglers before? Now keep it PG.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
My brain skipped a beat there for a second.
Yeah, I know.
But yeah, go ahead.
It's a little device because many companies, they have monitoring software that runs behind, so they can see how many hours you're spending in Word or online, and so there's a tool apparently you can connect to your mouse that you can open up a Word document, and it put some letters in there, and then the mouse will continue to move, which is supposed to trick this surveillance software. And of course, they can tell that you're not really working. And so that deception will also get you fired. And so you see these things pop up on LinkedIn all the time. But it doesn't feel like we're talking about kind of like the root cause of the sentiment. We're not talking about like, we're just focusing on this gamemanship. And you just think everyone's spending a lot of time, like no one's doing the work. We're not talking about the work. We're not talking about what a company produces. It's now this dynamic, this, are we engaging employees, or are they coming into the office? Like we're kind of going down a rabbit hole on it. And I think I don't know. I think hopefully it will end somewhere where we're going to talk a little bit more about having meaning about your work, which I think is kind of closer to the root cause of mouse jigglers and badging. And
there you go. When I'd heard it on TikTok, they had called it coffee badgering, and I was like, what? But the term on the proper search is coffee badging. Leave it to TikTok to embellish anything.
Yeah.
Or people not to, it's just ham-handed, the average citizen trying to do news over there on TikTok. And it looks like there's a pay-to-quit program that Amazon has implemented too surrounding it. For 1-year employees that are new, it's a $2,000 severance package. In the 4th year, it's up to $5,000. So this is ironic. Once again, the term show, we'll call this. The program's tagline is called "Please don't take this offer." Isn't that ironic?
Wow.
Yeah. But it seems like what employers are doing now. I think I was reading recently the Bank of America is now offering $25 an hour for the unpopular jobs, which are basically the grunt work at the office jobs. So they're actually starting to pay a premium to the people that are coming in. And then it seems like HR is trying to weed out people and get new people in and tie them back into working in the office. So who knew you had to remake contracts for that? But welcome to 2024.
Well, you remember after COVID, it was especially in finance where I worked. Finance had never been particularly work from home friendly. Like everyone likes it's open floor plan. Everyone likes to see each other. And then of course the pandemic sent everyone home, and then everyone was like, "This is great." And then it was like, "Okay, it's safe now. Everybody come back." And everyone went, "That's okay." It's like, no, we mean it now. And at first it was a little more carrot than stick. It was like, we're gonna have pizza and bagels. It's going to be great. Oh yeah, pizza parties and they were just trying to get everybody back in. And then you'd see on LinkedIn, it kind of makes me roll my eyes. But pictures like #BetterTogether, #InTheOffice, connected and all this stuff, and everyone's smiling and everyone's like, "Nope. We're good. Never mind. We're good." And then finally it's like, no, we mean it now. And so there was like this two years after the return to the office where there was like a staring contest. And then finally it became, okay, now we mean it. And then, kind of calling the bluff. Well, there was a consequence model, and the consequence model is like you get fired, or you're not going to get promoted or something like that. And now I think most places are moving back to 5 days a week. Certainly the banks are moving back to 5 days a week, and now tech. And so there's really nowhere to go, because I felt like in the beginning it was going to be the smart company was going to offer everyone work from home and get all the best and brightest people. And it didn't happen. Everyone locked arms. All the CEOs locked arms and said, "No, this is what we're doing."
I have read though that the companies are still embracing remote, and sometimes it's because they can. They just have the setup and operations like software and stuff. They are doing pretty good with hiring and getting those people put together. Is what I'm reading. It's an interesting thing. So there's so many different things in the new dynamic of remote. There's so many different things that were a problem in business before. So with your guys' podcast, we should get a plug-in for the name as long as we're referencing it. Plug away. The Business Psychos podcast, as it were. You guys have plenty of material. You could probably do 10,000 episodes plus with that, because there's so many different issues. Sexual harassment, of course, DEI stuff in the workplace. Who broke the copier, that sort of thing.
Who broke the copier? I think that's like a 5-episode series, Chris.
Yeah.
Like
who left the copy of their butt in the copier dispenser tray?
Those are the simple times.
Those are clearly a but.
That's the reason. That's a reason to go into the office, is that kind of chaos. People forget about the joy of that kind of like ridiculousness.
That's what I miss from the thing. I mean, really, when it comes down to it, I work from home since 2004. So I was doing remote work all this time, and when everybody started doing it, I'm like, hey, what the hell? I've been here forever. You guys are acting like this is new. And I was kind of aware that they were going to have issues. What are some of the other things you guys have talked about so far on the show and some of the episodes? Let's tease out some of the episodes. What are some of the things that you guys discussed so far that maybe surprised you, or some great episodes that you were like, wow, that was kind of wild? And we've talked about the quiet quitting, I think, a little bit.
Yeah, I think shame, you mentioned we did a shame episode. That's sort of a little bit left of center for things that you'd see on LinkedIn and traditional business podcasts. Certainly some cultures, shame is a big driver. It's a big motivator on how you succeed, how you manage other people. We did a really interesting story about, being on a conference call with somebody and your boss just humiliating you in front of everybody on the conference call. And certainly I think maybe back in the day, in the 80s and even the early 90s, this kind of behavior was normal. I mean, you look at Mad Men and some like Succession and some traditional businesses, you can't, I mean, it's a good thing. You can't get away with that so much everywhere now, but it's almost like we're still mid-change, and you have a lot of different generations in the workforce at one time. So you have people who used to work in an environment where some of this behavior was completely appropriate. And then you have, let's say, Gen Z coming in where they're, finding that very antagonistic, very threatening behavior. And you have a lot of complexity in how you run a business when you have people who are just experiencing those different norms very, very differently.
Yeah. And they look at things differently, the Gen Z and the millennials and stuff, than us Gen X's, because we were the greatest generation ever. So shaming is bad then?
Shaming's bad. You don't learn when you're shamed. Like your brain shuts down when you experience shame. It's not great for learning. It's not great for trust, for teaming, for innovation, for creativity. Shame's not a great motivator. It's not a tool to run your business. It's not a leadership skill for sure.
Damn it. Note to self.
You got to watch the podcast.
Note to self. Note to self. I have COVID. Note to self. Stop shaming people in the office. All right. Maybe I'll do that. Maybe I won't.
Yeah, and you don't need a harassment suit either, right? So from a risk perspective, you're kind of the environment's a little bit different now, where you need to be careful about those. True.
I mean, really, shaming is a sport in my office, so it's a survival sport. It's a survival sport. You may want to do a podcast on that.
Yeah, we may need to do an intervention on your office.
Yeah, that live intervention.
Yeah.
Chris, it sounds like you like the shaming part of it.
There was a time.
I think you misunderstood what the shaming topic was actually about. Yeah, I think you thought it was how to shame.
You're really leaning in.
So I'm trying to figure out why it's bad. But once again, there's no HR department at the Chris Voss Show. We fired them. They fired themselves.
You shamed them. You shamed them out of the building.
We said we're over this DEI stuff. You gone too far. There's an endless amount of topics between leadership and business, workplace ethics, workplace morals, shaming. There's always the sexual harassment stuff. That's always great. I remember when we got our first sexual harassment complaint in our company against two employees, or one employee to the other, and it was two guys. I never expected that to be a thing. I was expected it would be a female and a male. But, hey, the adventures of business are just endless. Yeah.
Well, and you mentioned ageism before. Certainly, the statistics show that the folks in the boomer generation who are still working, they're putting off retirement for whatever reason, probably for
because they don't have any money for
exactly.
2008.
Yeah. And our generation, the older side of X, as they're starting to approach retirement age, is not ready. And what you have is a lot of pressure at the top of the pyramid as the younger generations are coming up. So unfortunately, a lot of folks over 45 are not getting callbacks for for interviews. Recruiters are filtering out people of a certain age. There's a lot of analysis around perceptions that people of a certain age don't want to learn. They are adverse to technology, and we're not done working yet, right? So it brings up a lot of difficulty for, especially as you have like reorgs and layoff patterns happening, where people lose a spot at a company and you can't get back in. Now you're completely unprotected. So there's a lot of people I know who are trying to figure out how to rebrand themselves. So even taking, you take dates off your resume. You don't put what date you graduated high school or college. You don't want to age yourself. It used to be customary that you'd say, oh, I've got X decades of experience. Now you don't want to say that. That's not good now. Now you don't want to do that.
And it's true. Like I have a bunch. I don't have that problem since no one will hire me, and I'm completely do not work well with others, and I've been that way since 18. So it's really gotten bad. I've just gotten worse over time. That's the other reason we don't have an HR department too. And there's the shaming competition. It's almost like shaming is almost like an Olympics here at the Chris Voss Show. It actually we award a gold medal yearly as to who can shame the hardest. And make people, whatever.
You're not kidding, are you?
Maybe, maybe not. But we do have nets outside the windows, like Foxconn of Apple. So just to make sure people don't get too depressed and jump. We can't have that. We need them to stay alive because we need to shame them more. Can you tell it's really a thing here? Anyway, It's a bit. People, calm down. Don't write me. But I segued too many times, and now I'm lost. And I've got COVID brain. Well, this has been very insightful, guys. I'm looking forward to the future episodes of your show and finding out what's going on. Maybe you guys can flesh out that shaming some more or whatever other topics we've talked. I think another topic you guys could have, I could probably make endless bits on this, but another topic you guys should do is if we were allowed not to wear pants at home and do Zoom calls in our underwear, why is it we can't do that at work? So I think this is unfair. I think this is discrimination.
You're asking all the right questions.
Yeah, and we should be able to walk around in a robe at the office and be comfortable. People have those timeout rooms at the office. You know what I mean? They have little whatever timeout rooms in Silicon Valley where some people have nap rooms and stuff. Well, if we're gonna have nap rooms, we should be able to walk around in our underwear. Like,
Absolutely.
Come on, man. I don't have to shower.
Let things breathe a little bit.
3 or 4 days, let things breathe a bit in an open environment, office space. What could go wrong? Yeah, you're like, hey, Bob, when was the last time you showered? I don't know, man. I've been day drinking and working and stuff. And day drinking in the office needs to make a comeback too. Although in Silicon Valley, that never left.
I think there's plenty of day drinking and gummy ingesting in the offices these days. That's probably another episode.
Is that what the new thing is?
They're microdosing in the offices.
I'm not going to say anything about what's on my desk right now.
Are you feeling very attacked by us right now?
I am. I'm feeling assaulted. First, you're after me for shaming, and you're shaming me for shaming. I want to call you out on that, by the way. You're shaming me for shaming.
Fair.
So there you go. That's the tactic I use when HR calls. I'm like, are you shaming me? And they're like, no, you have a problem. And I'm like, I feel like this is a microaggression. Who can I talk to about this? And like, well, us. And I'm like, yeah, but you guys are the problem. So I need an HR department that oversees HR. Yeah. So anyway, this is why I can't work with other people, and I'm not allowed to. There's actually a judge who says I can't do it in my parole agent. So there you go. Next week, though, I get one of my 6 ankle bracelets off. So, ladies, it's been wonderful to have you on. Give us the final pitch out for people to subscribe to your show. Check it out. I'll give you both a shot at that.
Yeah, we're at businesspsychos.com. You'll find links to all the places you can hear and watch us and get in touch with us. We're also on Insta, Facebook, and YouTube at Business Psychos Pod. And if you like LinkedIn, we're over there too on Business Psychos Podcast.
There you go. Katie?
Yeah, I'd also add in, we have just added a hotline for listener comments, questions, and
Psychos.
we just Psychos, yeah. And so we are inviting our listeners. We actually just spliced in our first voicemail in an episode to share their comments, stories, and even show ideas, like ideas for topics. That's driven a lot of what we've brought to the table is, what are people wanting us to discuss? And so please, we ask our listeners and new listeners, hopefully, that will come along to just keep the feedback coming. We love it.
There you go. Yeah. So it sounds like a lot of fun. So, Psychos, you guys, are you gonna be like, how there's the Swifties of Taylor Swift, and
Yeah,
I think
I actually do
refer
refer them to psychos. That's our outros are all talking directly to our
your
psychos.
audience members are these psychos. I think
Yeah.
there's a few other people who make music and stuff. They have their terms for their fans and stuff like that. Our fans are just called unemployed and homeless. No, we love you guys out there. Get jobs, really, seriously. But there you go. Thanks, Mary and Katie, for being on the show. We really appreciate it. Thank
Awesome.
you.
Had a great time. Thank you.
Very much fun.
Thanks, Chris.
There you go. It was great to have the psychos on the show. On a show run by a psycho, complete psycho. After 16 years, I can't take this anymore. At least the COVID part. Thanks for tuning in, everyone. We certainly appreciate it. Go to goodreads.com/Chris Voss, LinkedIn.com/Chris Voss, Chris Voss on the TikTok, and all those crazy ass places on the internet. Thanks for tuning in. Be good to each other. Stay safe. We'll see you next.